into our deep dive conversation, which is the riskiest of business. That's right. That's right. We're talking about risky business decisions. Sorry, I just it's my back from break cough. You guys put the pieces together. All the recent talk about the Snyder Cut and how it has made us really think. The entertainment industry has gotten pretty cutthroat, right? There are tons of risks for everyone and for anyone who gets involved, from being on the receiving end of crunch to making stressful decisions at the top of the chain. The risks are endless and failure could strike at any moment. For many companies, this creates a constant struggle. Do we play it safe, or do we innovate to ensure that we stay relevant? Tonight, we're going to talk about when you hold them and when you fold them when dealing with the risky business that is the entertainment industry. And Brahma, we're going to start with you, someone who works directly in the entertainment industry, with a very simple question of, is the concept of risk and reward any different in the entertainment industry than other industries?
I think it is a little different just because the risks that you're taking are very obvious, or people are going to directly see those things. People are going to judge those things. Yeah, yeah.
Comicbook.com is going to write an article about it, you know?
So yeah, you're on the big screen, you're on the radar for a lot of people, and you get judged if you take risks. You get judged if you don't take enough risks. So it's like you're always kind of tiptoeing the line of where to be in public opinion, I feel like. So yeah, that kind of just attention is what makes it different than other industries.
The spotlight really makes it different than
Spotlight,
other industries.
yeah.
I agree with that. Kev, you have anything, any why the risk and reward might be different in the entertainment industry? In particular, like, Brum was mostly talking about TV and movies. Let's focus on video games. Is it any different in the video game industry?
Yes, it is, because I think risk in the video games industry more so can sort of change the landscape of gaming, i.e., innovation, and not just graphics, but how we play games, right? How it's delivered.
Right.
Like, I'll talk about more later, but Nintendo from using a lot of gyroscopic motion controls in a lot of their games and IPs, and Microsoft taking big risk like Connect, and then it not really paying out so well, but Connect benefiting them in other ways, which I'll also talk about later.
Right.
Yeah.
Are there any, Kev, let's start with you on this one. Kev, are there any particular TV, movie, or video games franchises that you see taking a lot of risks and being rewarded for it, being on the positive end of the risk controversy?
So I may be impartial here, but the first game franchise that I know that takes a big risk would probably be Mass Effect. Given the time that game came out, right? Like, their whole thing was they wanted the Shepard's story to be the player's story, and
Right.
in a lot of ways it was, even down to the part with the relationships that you had with your crewmates and characters in the game.
Yeah, and before you go too far, I do want to build on this point just a little bit, because FemShep,
Yeah,
why FemShep is so important to so many players is actually because of the similarities she has with regular Shep, right? Or
yes,
not regular Shep, they're both regular Shep. Forgive me for that. Male Shep.
yeah,
And the fact that they are pretty much exactly the same, except for a few different lines of dialogue that may be changed, they're treated almost identically. I think was a risky decision at the beginning point. There's so many risky decisions that you can talk about at Mass Effect, honestly.
yeah.
But to your point, that ended up changing the landscape of gaming forever, and representation in gaming forever. So please continue on your point, though. I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I think Nintendo's always, and I know some people who probably have mixed feelings about this. They'll say they kind of just rinse, wash, repeat with their IPs, and that is true. But they do it in a way that they make the characters not necessarily more relevant, but they evolved them without ruining the integrity or the foundation of what made those characters and IP special, right? Like Breath of the Wild going from what the Legend of Zelda games was to this massive, expansive landscape, right? That you just traverse over.
Right.
And not only just within their games, but Nintendo consoles themselves, right? From the Wii to the
Yeah,
Wii, like Nintendo swings and misses sometimes, but
they do.
I think it benefits them more than it does it
R.I.P.
fails them,
Wii
right?
U.
Like yeah, but the Wii U set up the Switch, like it was
It did.
kind of like they had like an idea where it's like, okay, the controller wasn't great, but what if we made the controller the console and then just had,
Hmm.
you know, the motion controller be the controller or just a
Right.
regular controller?
It's like, what if
And
we took the
it seems
best
like
aspects of the Wii and the best aspects of the Wii U and meshed them
yes,
together and
yes,
pretended like the
that's
Wii U
what they
didn't
did.
happen?
Yes, exactly. And not only that, and Nintendo's another one, but Xbox and Microsoft, right? From
Right.
Microsoft, with all the things that they've been doing from smart delivery to Game Pass. Game Pass is huge,
Yeah.
like if like especially now with all the companies that they bought up, them buying ZeniMax and owning the rights to all the Bethesda IPs and stuff, and then also them partnering with EA, and essentially you get EA Play if you own if you're a Game Pass Ultimate member.
Right.
So it's just, and at the time that didn't seem plausible. Like you're gonna give these people all these games for $15 a month, and yeah, it works. I have it, and I love it. It's brilliant. I think that's the way that game is gonna go, and I think you're starting to see other sort of companies like Google with Stadia. They're trying to push that. They just don't have. I don't think they have the knowledge and the sort of resources or experience to execute these things. I think Microsoft will see that and be like, oh, that's how they're doing it. Well, we can do it this way much better, right? Because Microsoft in itself, cloud computing is our space anyway. So we're just going to take what you're trying to do and make it 1,000 times better. Um, but I think more granularly, I think like uh, yeah, I think games in general, I think they either do one or two things. For instance, right, like the whole open world concept at its inception was a big risk, right? Because you were like, okay, most games you have it's point A to point B, it's all linear stuff. So you're going to give
Hmm.
players the option to choose how they do that. That's a risk in itself, and it's a risk in where if it pays out, if it pays off, if the developers in the if they make a game where it's not that sandbox isn't just an empty sandbox with nothing in it but sand, right? Like that's
Right.
how
Right. You got to
i.e.
have something.
Right, like
Yeah.
Sea of Thieves was like that. There's a few other games that are like that. They come out, they're just like open world, and it's not really a risk. It's more of a cop out at this point because everyone's doing it. So it's not something that's new and innovative.
Yeah.
So now it's like almost you're gonna go and shift in another direction where you're gonna have like kind of these hybrid linear open world stories, like you're saying with Fallen Order and stuff like that. So
Yeah.
yeah, those are the things that come to mind anyway.
As Gonzo puts it, the Wii U walked so the Switch could run, um, which is great. Are there any Brahman? Are there any particular movie, TV, video games franchises that you look at as took some risks and then bombed?
Bombed. Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was like right on the reward side of it. I was
No,
all
no,
ready
no,
to
no.
go.
What to
Oh
go
no.
on the other end? On the other end,
Yeah.
tanked. What are some that took the risk and lost it all?
Lost it all. Okay, well, Gonzo just brought up a good point. The Wii.
Yeah,
That
the
was
Wii
a
U. The Wii U was a big risk. No, that's actually a great one. The Wii
Yeah.
U was a big risk, and it
mhm,
was a big flop.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
It was. It
I,
was.
there's
I
there.
I think that
Um.
one of them that I can think of that would be a big one. You can think of some of the what you guys were talking about on the last episode of season one. Some of these bad season finales. Game of Thrones taking huge risks in its last season that did not pay off, and that have
Yeah.
pretty much erased it from pop culture. I think a lot of bad season finales, you can say they took risks, particularly at the end, that that bombed the franchise. Kev, do you have any that you can think of?
So Game of Thrones, I don't know if they risked it or if they just dropped the ball. Like you can't
Yeah.
you can't risk anything if you like they
Well, I
like
would
like
I would
George R.
say
R. Martin gave them
risking,
the ball.
yeah, but risking the choices that they made there, like having Jon Snow do all those things, making Bran the king for whatever fucking
Yeah.
reason. Like a lot of
Yeah,
the
you're right.
points that
That
people
is a risk.
complain
Yeah. Yeah.
were risky things to think of, were
Yeah.
risky things to
Yeah.
do and put in the plot. And George R. R. Martin didn't write the book so that he could eventually
Yeah.
go, that didn't work. I'm not going to
Yeah.
write that so that I can say that that was not my idea.
Yeah.
And that's, I won't blame him for saying that.
Yeah. I guess when I think of risk, I think of like Marvel's like signing 5 AAA actors to do a movie, right? Like that doesn't
Yeah.
happen. That didn't happen before then, really. Like you had Chris
Hmm.
Evans, Tony Stark, Scarlett Johansson, all the Samuel J. List goes on and all in one movie,
Yeah.
right? I think the whole MSCU experiment itself was a big risk, and I think there's other and I think Star Wars taking a risk with like Mandalorian, I think that's huge. Like anytime you do a spin-off or anytime you touch Star Wars in general, it's a risk
Right.
because you're gonna be met with vitriol anyway.
Right. You really
And then
are.
you saw them drop the ball with that with the new trilogy. In my opinion, some may disagree, but
Yeah.
I
And,
think
and it's,
that was something that didn't
it
pan
was,
out.
it was definitely a risk to take after all the feedback that they'd gotten
Right.
from the, 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 the sequel trilogy is what it's supposed to be called. You have the original trilogy, the prequel
Yeah.
trilogy, and the sequel trilogy. That's the sequel trilogy.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
with all that they bombed there, you know, there's a ton. Oh, Gonzo had a great example. Anthem.
Yeah.
That was a whole bunch of risk.
That was
That was jumping
yes.
in feet
From
first.
and not
Yeah.
only did they screwed themselves two ways. All of their talent off of the Mass Effect team and putting them on that project and ultimately screwing 2 games at once, right? Like
Yeah.
it. So yeah, it's a good example.
No, I think that that's a fantastic example.
Yeah, yeah,
You can go back and turn the clock and go back to the ET game, the famous ET game that's filled some landfill somewhere. Was a huge
yeah,
risk that someone thought that there could be in a cartridge game for ET, you know,
yeah,
and
yeah,
and then that would be successful and that would work.
yeah,
So it is what it
yeah,
is in some
yeah,
circumstances, right? I think that's the
yeah,
best that you can go with.
I think there's
yeah,
Um,
also
and then
risks in like the way people like present media too.
mhm.
That like uh there's I like if a couple movies have done this where they've shot a film like from like your perspective from like first person perspective, and I don't think I've really seen that done well yet.
yeah,
uh, I liked Blair Witch, like from that sort of standpoint. So I feel like that's like a way
mm,
which was successful, like that sort of found footage, your
Cloverfield
perspective,
too.
you're watching it from your eyes. And then you see something like Cloverfield, which in my opinion was
Hmm.
just like all over the place and
Hmm.
I didn't really relate to it as much. So yeah, I think that that's a huge risk and just changing the structure and the point of view in which you experience content.
Yeah,
That's true.
yeah.
Yeah.
Let's get just a little more granular on some of these risks. Okay, what do you think is some of the biggest risks taken in the movie industry recently? Kev, let's start with you.
The Snyder cut. Can I
Yeah,
go there?
yeah.
Is
I
that fair?
mean that is a
Well, no, you know
risk.
what? No, no. Okay, well, this will be really easy then. HBO Max and all those movies coming to HBO Max,
Yeah,
right? Like that's a huge risk.
and there's a
Because
lot of people that
they
weren't
don't.
very happy about it.
Oh well, yeah, mostly Hollywood execs, but
Right.
for obvious reasons. But no, that's a huge risk. You're essentially taking something that has always been done a certain way and then going the opposite direction of it. Not only going the opposite direction, but going into what has been a threat to that specific industry in general, right? Like so it's definitely because that was the thing, right? Like think about it before this whole streaming thing came on. Like movies that went straight to DVDs were never great movies for the most
Yeah.
part, right? You had a couple lost gems,
Right.
but you didn't really hear much about them. So now like there's this that was a trope for a while where if it doesn't go to the big screen at first, then it's not worth your time and it's
Hmm.
not noteworthy. But that's not the case anymore. And I think you're gonna see that with what HBO Max is doing. And I think if this turns out to be successful, because they even had a couple more coming with Godzilla versus Kong and Mortal Kombat.
Yeah, there's a
Right.
lot
I
of them
think
that people are excited about.
if this turns out to be a success, then you're going to start, just like anything else, right? That if it works, other people are going to copy you.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Braun, same question. What do you think are some of the biggest risks taken in the movie industry recently? Or do you think we got it out covered in that? Brahman?
Sorry, I lost you for a second.
Oh, whoops. Can you hear me now?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Am I back?
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you
Yeah.
hear me?
Yeah, we're good.
Okay, cool.
Yes,
What are some of the biggest
now I
risks that
can.
you've seen
It
taken to the
froze
movie
for a
industry?
second.
No worries.
Biggest risk making movies during a pandemic.
That's
Yeah,
that's a
yeah,
risk. Yeah,
yeah,
1000%.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
It's a risky business. But what
Um,
I find interesting is the things that are the risks people are taking. If they'll take it,
Hmm.
it'll be successful, and then that'll become like not a risk anymore, you know?
Oh, that's how it
yeah.
goes, right?
Yeah.
Like that you that yeah, it's everything's monkey see, monkey do in a way,
Mhm.
right? Like if something works, you're gonna be like, oh, we have to do it that way now. Like that's the new standard.
Mhm.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, sometimes to divert risk, corporations and creators lean on nostalgia. We know this. We've
Yeah.
seen this in reboots, remakes, spin-offs, even. But just because it's familiar doesn't mean it comes without its risks, right? I mean,
Hmm.
the Mario Brothers movie doesn't have a franchise for a reason, right? And they were banking on a franchise.
Hey, don't
If
we
you
can't
watch
just
the end of
think
that
about it like
movie, they set up for a sequel, and that sequel does not happen. Doom, awful movie. Detective Pikachu, absolute banger.
That's true. I
Back to the
really did
Future
like
knew
the movie.
exactly when to stop. Terminator didn't. Green Lantern was so bad it killed an entire superhero. I mean, do we need another Resident Evil movie? Really? Like, there's a whole bunch of these that we can talk about. But what are some remakes or sequels that, or even originals based on another IP that are worth risk killing, worth risking killing the franchise for? Kev,
The Witcher.
The Witcher.
That was so
Okay,
fucking fantastic.
explain.
It was just amazing. Like
Yeah.
if you had never seen The Witcher, if you didn't know what
Mhm.
The Witcher was, and you watched the show, it would be an incredible show for you. And I
Yeah.
know people like my girlfriend for one, like, and also too. I mean, I knew who The Witcher was, but I never had really played the games because
Right.
they're overwhelming. But yeah, like that by itself, and I think that's how you know if you have like if you've taken a good risk and it's been a hit is if it stands alone without the reputation of its nostalgia or wherever you're pulling it from, right? Like if
Right.
The Witcher was just The Witcher, right? Take the title out the name, take whatever. If you just had that thing, that story, the content, everything, and it's great, and you can and you didn't even recognize where it's from, I think that's how you know a risk paid off, right? I think too many times you're going to be driven and inspired by nostalgia to like something, and I think sometimes if you can have something that's independent of that, then that's how you know it really worked.
Yeah. No, for real. I think you're right on. Um y- Brahman, what were some that you know weren't worth risk killing the franchise and finally ended up hurting the brand forever, as far as remakes and sequels?
Right.
Oh, Brahman, are you still there?
I don't know why.
Oh, oh,
I'm
oh.
still here.
Okay, there we go.
Things that work. We're good.
Yep, we're good now. So some things that weren't worth risk killing the franchise and hurt the brand forever.
Assassin's Creed.
Assassin's
Mm,
Creed.
mm.
Okay, go. Do tell. Do tell. Why?
Please
Why do you say Assassin's
elaborate.
Creed?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I feel like that movie was just so
yeah. Very.
unnecessary, and it was kind of just
Hmm.
giving people who didn't play the games kind of an experience like the game, and then it was giving everyone who did play the games just an itch to turn it off and like fire up their console because it's like
That's an interesting pick.
Yeah, that is.
Yeah,
I forgot about that movie. It was bad. It
that is a
was.
that is a fantastically interesting pick. But you're absolutely right. That is one that wasn't uh really it wasn't worth killing the franchise, and it really could have. I
Yeah.
think that I feel like it was enough to keep the franchise afloat, and Assassin's Creed just dropped Valhalla, and they're just they're still good at what they're good at, so it's
Mhm.
kept it
Yeah.
afloat. But did it have the potential to? Absolutely, and it was a pretty terrible. That's one I wouldn't think of. A good pick there, Bronwyn. um what do you
And
think
here's the other
is the
thing too.
go ahead.
I think like and to stay on that, I think like Um, just the fact that they went in this direction with Valhalla. Granted, they were pressured to because of some of the you know misogynistic things that were going on
Yeah.
with their previous titles. But I mean, that was a risk, and it seemingly
Mhm.
paid off. But I think everyone kind of knew it would have paid off. They just would have done this originally.
True. True. True.
Yeah,
All right. Yeah.
yeah,
What do you
yeah.
guys believe is the best example of cashing in on nostalgia gone wrong? Period. I think when I think of it, I think of the sequel trilogy of Star Wars. I think that the way that they try to bring back nostalgia there just didn't work in every single element. Can you guys think of any examples?
I think of the prequel trilogy of Star Wars too. I don't think
Yeah.
any of those really, yeah, other than like for me, I think there's one movie from either of those that were good, and then the others were just awful.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, but that's just my opinion. But outside of that, I think, oh God, like how many, like you said, how many Resident Evil movies do we need?
Hmm.
Uh, it's kind of a running joke for me, but Fast and Furious is getting there. I
Yeah.
mean, it's probably already there for most people, but it is what it is. I accept it for what it is. You
Yeah.
know, it's just it's an adrenaline of cocaine straight to the face with cars, Vin Diesel, and The Rock. You know, and yeah,
Yeah.
I think that's another one that's just as long as it keeps making money, they're gonna keep putting them out.
Right. Right. Brahman, what about you? Do you think there's any good examples of nostalgia gone wrong?
Yeah, and this is maybe like a different way that people use nostalgia, but something like Wonder Woman 84, where it's just like
Hmm.
trying to like really lean in on an era and like kind
That
of
is that is another way. Yeah, you're
That was
absolutely
perfect.
right. There's like
That
this
was perfect.
cash cow idea of like of Guardians of the Galaxy and that whole
Yeah.
vibe where people are just trying to cash in on the nostalgia vibe of a certain generation.
Yeah, yeah, it was. It's there been a real like try, but like I guess people trying to cash in on the '80s from
they were
Yeah.
not
Stranger
at the
Things
time.
to no, they weren't.
No
They
one
really
who
weren't.
wants to go back to the 80s.
They
Reagan
really
does.
weren't.
Other than
Yeah, I
that,
know.
people that like
You know what?
Reagan.
Like but it's weird because I think like it works for some movies when they make it make sense. Like Stranger Things made sense because they didn't. I feel like they didn't really force it.
Yeah.
But like Wonder Woman 84, even the acting was 80s. Like it looked like there's a reason why we stopped acting like that. It's bad. Like like they were like
Right.
everything like they had the 80s tropes. Like I get the nostalgia trip. That's fine if you're going to do
Mhm.
everything from the Americana pop culturist icons, right? From like whatever soda was cool or shoes or hairstyles or whatever. That's fine, but you know, leave the acting out of it. Like
Right.
that's actually what irritated me the most. I'm like, I don't watch 80s movies for good reason. Like they're most of them
Yeah.
aren't that good if we're being honest.
Yeah. For real.
Yeah.
Little as Nelly's been popping up in the chat. I'm 100% certain Disney remakes are done with the goal of raising merch sales on classic looks. For each
Uh,
remake they've done, I've seen 10 times as much officially licensed pulls on classics, and I've had
yeah,
the
yeah,
remakes looks, and they always outsell.
yeah,
I mean, yeah, I mean, that's a very valid reason, and that is 100% like the strictest version of capitalism capitalizing
yeah,
on nostalgia in
yeah,
one of the strongest ways. But
yeah,
let's take a shift here. What about playing it safe? Right, we've heard a lot about what it comes to, taking risks in the business. But what about the opposite of taking risk? What about playing it safe? We've heard, when it comes to the recent Pokemon announcements, these games, we have some people that complain, Jake, that these games haven't
yeah.
evolved very much,
I wish he was
and
here.
believe that what would the best way that these games could that these games haven't evolved very much, pun
Yeah.
intended, first off, um,
Great one.
and that it could benefit from those kind of risks. Do you guys agree? I mean, is Jake right? Are there some games, and some of them are the ones that are pictured on our image below here.
Yeah.
Madden's in this bucket as well. Um, as
Brothers.
far as making the same game over and over again and not really taking very much risk, sticking to what works and not really building off of it much. Kev, what do you
Yeah.
think?
Yeah, if you're not in our Discord, you really miss some spicy takes from Jake
Yeah.
uh, in regards to the Pokemon franchise, which some I agreed with, some I didn't. I think, like you said, tried and tested, and I think if it works, sometimes you gotta keep milking the cow, so to speak, or whatever analogy you want to use. I think it's just
Mhm.
at some point you want, like, you're gonna get tired, and you're gonna get, I think you're gonna feel like it's soulless. And remember, and I think what I initially accidentally started this discussion because I saw a YouTube video of this guy saying that what kind of killed that franchise was just the 3D animations, because it makes the Pokemon seem lifeless, which I kind of agreed with. And
Yeah.
the animations had looked the same for like the past 5 generations or 5 games or so, right? And I think that's when it's time to innovate, right? Because this stuff is art in a way. Your art shouldn't be soulless.
Right.
And if it comes to that, then you got to figure out, okay, what are we not doing here? Like, and sometimes it's not a big overhaul; it's just adding a little spice to it, right? Like,
Right.
uh,
Making
you
Raichu
know,
stand on its tail, like
yeah, something like that, or
something
just
fun.
different textures and shading. Try different graphic outputs, something
Yeah.
else. Try something a little different to re-energize. Otherwise,
Yeah.
what's gonna happen is, and this is also a part, you can kind of get away with it when you don't have a competitor,
Hmm.
and you see that a lot with anything, from Pokemon to wrestling to
Right.
Madden, to NBA
Madden's
2K.
a
When
big
there's
one.
not a yeah, so is 2K. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
Um, it
Once
gets
you
to a
got those
point
sport
where
games, EA in general.
right, where it's like you could just like, I'm pretty sure they just like the box art's the same behind it. Like they didn't
Hmm.
even bother. You know when you like change your tags, but you don't change them, you just put the sticker over
Right.
top of it. Like that's how a lot of these games are now.
Yeah.
And and a lot of it's to do with competition, that and they're playing it safe because it works financially for them, but it doesn't really work for the game, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Most more times than not, anyway.
Brahma, what about you? What are the benefits to playing it safe?
So I'm going to reference Zelda, and I know that their most recent game is obviously not part of this structure, and they completely took a risk there, and I love what they did. But if you look at just
Hmm.
like the history of that game,
Yeah.
you're basically throughout all the iterations, you're interacting with the same characters, you have the same kind of arc, you have the same kind of quest,
Yeah.
and they do that over and over again, but they like change the animation or change the time period, and it's like those little subtle changes, but you really are playing a similar game
Right.
throughout the history of it. And I think that they do a good job of like playing it safe while not playing it safe.
Hmm.
Yeah.
They gave their fans what they wanted, but it was like
Hmm.
those subtle ways in which they change things or
And I think
it.
to your point with that, you get with the to particularly point back to the benefits of you get from playing it safe there,
Mhm.
you get an experience that you can expect that you'll like. Like, if you're gonna this next Zelda game that comes out, you're gonna
Mhm.
like it because there are at least some elements of predictability that you're going to have.
Right.
And those elements have been predictably good.
Yeah.
And I think that that is the core point of why um, you know Pokemon is like that with you know when I see a Pokemon game, one of the biggest things I want to know about it is, am I going to get to play with Pokemon? Like, am I going to get to play within that franchise? Temtem offers a very, very similar experience to Pokemon, but what is the difference between Temtem and Pokemon? Temtem isn't a Pokemon franchise. I
Yeah.
can't get a reboot in Temtem
Yeah.
because Nintendo has copyrighted that and has secured that experience and made it very reliable in that way. And do I think that they could innovate more? Absolutely, but I do think that that is to Bronwyn's point, one of the biggest benefits of playing it safe. You do need to innovate, like Bronwyn was saying, with
Yeah.
how Zelda changes up the graphics, and like you may have a guide, but this time this guide turns you into a wolf, and in the next one that
Yeah.
guide allows you to fly on a bird,
Yeah.
whatever the case may be.
Yeah. Well,
But
and that's the thing, right? Like, I think that's the difference, where it's like Pokemon's playing it safe has kind of just been reskinned games in a way. Like they'll probably sprinkle in different innovations or stuff that might be more kind
mm,
of nuanced to people who play it more regularly, who would notice like minor changes like that, where it's like Mario in 3D, Mario on an island with a water gun, Mario in
right,
space, Mario traveling circumventing the world in a balloon. Like these, like I, they're it's enough to like change the game where without
yeah,
changing what's important. And I think we saw that where I think in a way that get back to your point, where I think Pokemon will do that. Hopefully,
Hmm.
is with the Legends reveal. Like we're all hoping for
Yeah,
that. Kind of what
yeah, I
Braun
think
was
so
saying,
too.
where it's the same with the Legend of Zelda, right? Like the way they change it is like they'll do a graphics change. It went from 3D graphics to like a more cartoon shaded graphics, back to
Right.
like Skyward Sword with using the Wiimote,
Hmm.
and then here with Breath of the Wild, and yeah, and I think and then Nintendo does a good job of that with those games because I don't know. I think their development's like, okay, where can we put these characters next? Like what? And I think that's what works, right? They're like, let's put them in a situation where they're going to be challenged, but it's not going to challenge the integrity or the foundation of what makes these characters great.
Yeah. No, I completely agree. I think that that's probably the biggest benefit to playing it safe. But while playing it
Yeah,
safe can pay the bills and keep the lights on your yacht, you got to risk it to get the biscuit, in my
yes,
opinion. You
you
know
do. Popeye's
what?
biscuit.
Yeah, what do you believe is the best payout for franchises that did take the risk?
Gosh, Fortnite. I know people are gonna hate
Fortnite.
me for this, but that was the biggest risk. Like that
Yeah.
game, a lot of people, if you don't know, Fortnite was initially a four-player PvE,
Hmm.
and it failed so bad, and that was a risk in itself. Like that game, well, I guess it was kind of Left 4 Deadish. There was a few games that it was kind of like, but this one was more cartoony and fun. But the game failed so bad, they just said, "Screw it, we're gonna make PUBG, but with our skin." And they did
Yeah.
that, and it worked. And that was a risk that paid off, and you started seeing more franchises kind of do that with like going into this making games free to play. I think that's always a risk. Apex was a risk. um yeah, but I think Fortnite's the biggest one that comes to mind, just because they
Yeah.
essentially changed their entire game and made it free, and now they're one of the most successful games of all time.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a big one. Bron, what about you? Any
Oh,
any that you believe, um, the best payout for a franchise that did take the risk?
yeah, and it's one that we talked about earlier today. I'd say WandaVision because
Yeah, that's a good
they
one.
did something like they got me
Hmm.
reinterested
Yeah.
in Marvel when it had become really stale for me, and it's been a hugely successful show, and it shows
Yeah,
that like their other stuff is hugely successful too. So they could have kept on playing it safe and done what they always do, but they didn't. They took a risk and it brought in more people. It kept their fan base happy as well. So I think that that was a great risk. And I really hope to see more stuff from them that is different than their safe format.
I mean, you talked about earlier how you haven't seen um Age of Ultron.
Mhm.
Now you have a reason to watch Age of Ultron, right?
I know.
yeah,
You have a
Yeah.
reason to do it, and it's now gotten you back interested in it. So I think that you prove your point.
Yeah.
That it really did take some risks, and because of those risks, it brought new people into the franchise. So I think that that is fantastic, and that's a good point to wrap up our conversation on risky business in general,
yeah,
because we have a completely unrelated top zen. We wanted to make sure we got a good top zen in for Women's Month and honoring all that women bring into the wonderful nerd universe that we are here to create, and we've done some top 10 countdowns before, highlighting particularly female characters in video games. And with the success of WandaVision, we wanted to talk a little bit about the top 10 marvelous Marvel women. Well, we could talk about risky business in the entertainment industry all night. We got more show to do. So our last segment of the evening will hopefully be a better nod to Women's History Month than the time Burger King tweeted "Women belong in the kitchen." Yeah, that was a real thing.